What's the weirdest animal you would want to keep as a pet? My Instagram Reels feed is basically only animals at this point, and mostly exotic ones. Beavers, raccoons, capybaras, prairie dogs, red pandas. Every once in a while, when I'm feeling lonely and start thinking that an exotic animal would save me, I start Googling all the reasons why I can't have one to talk myself out of it. I live in New York City, so pretty much all of the outside of the box pet choices are illegal. It's even illegal to sell the vicious and uncontrollable guinea pig in New York now. But in the rest of the United States, some weird animals are actually legal, but only in certain states, mostly in the West or the South. And to my surprise, do you know what's actually legal in 8 states today? Owning a fucking tiger. That's right. Owning a tiger is at the very least unregulated, if not flat out legal. I know a bunch of you are probably getting early pandemic flashbacks to when everyone was watching The Tiger King, but this is honestly a crazier story. I'm here to tell you about this guy who not only owned a tiger, among other exotic, potentially lethal animals, but he owned one in fucking New York City. How? Why? Today let's talk about the story of Antoine Yates and Ming the tiger. Antoine Yates was living in Harlem, New York, in the project building known as the Drew Hamilton Houses. For those who are unaware, project buildings are city-owned apartments in New York. Even if you've never been to New York, you're probably aware that most people here don't have a lot of space, which makes this whole story even crazier. By first glance, Antoine was a regular New Yorker, 31 years old and working as a cab driver in the city. But in secret, or at least open secret, Antoine had a very unique hobby: owning exotic animals. It started at the ripe age of 11, when according to him, he had several capuchin and squirrel monkeys and 2 chimpanzees living in an apartment with his mother in Brooklyn. A monkey reportedly escaped and went to town on the rental office in the building, which led the family to move and sadly get rid of the monkeys as well. As an adult, Antoine had continued his impressive collection with a lion cub named Jabba and 2 pythons. In case that wasn't enough, Antoine also bought a baby alligator hatchling in New Jersey and raised it to be a 6 feet long beast, living in a plexiglass tank in another room in his apartment. Sadly, Jabba the lion passed away at a young age, which led Antoine to return to the Bearcat Hollow Animal Park in Racine, Minnesota, where he purchased an 8-week-old tiger named Ming. So Antoine lived with Ming and his happy little family of exotic creatures, ready for a Pixar adaptation, for 3 years. Have you liked and subscribed to my channel? I'm brand new, so every one of y'all counts. I'd really appreciate it. I do cool videos about the internet, music, New York, and random stories like this one, so tap in. Why the hell would this animal sanctuary be selling these animals to a guy living in a small 2-bedroom apartment in New York City? Well, according to Antoine, he told him he was starting a zoo. But in addition, the owner of the Bearcat Hollow Sanctuary, Kenneth Kraft, ended up facing charges for falsifying paperwork in another case involving the sale of a different tiger. So he may not have cared too much about where these animals were going. I'd guess he was just interested in making a bag. And how the hell was he paying for all these animals? According to the various articles I found, Antoine paid about $3,500 for Ming. That's certainly not nothing, but it's also the cost of like a shitty used car. So I guess it isn't really that far-fetched for a cab driver to be buying a large cat. Financially speaking, of course. In some interviews, he hinted at having gotten the money from some things in his past, and we can leave it at that because I'm not a narc. Of course, Antoine wasn't the first guy to own a tiger. Pet tigers became more popular in the 80s in America after movies like Scarface, and Michael Jackson took a picture with one on the cover of Thriller. Michael also owned 2 of them himself. So what makes Antoine's story any different? Well, for one, he's doing this in the crowded-ass city of New York. I'm not sure that the Neverland Ranch is the most appropriate location for tigers, or for, but there's more space there than in a project apartment in Harlem. The part that really sticks out to me is that he lived with this tiger in secret for 3 years. How the did nobody notice that this man had a tiger and an alligator in his apartment? And the answer, of course, is that for the most part, his neighbors probably just minded their own business. In New York, there definitely can be a culture of just letting your neighbor live their life. And unless it inconveniences you or puts you in direct danger, you just kind of let it be. We see crazy shit all the time, man. Seeing a tiger, honestly, I might not even do a double take. Now, Antoine had to feed Ming 20 pounds of chicken a day. That's about 10 rotisserie chickens that you get at Costco. That's like 5 Super Bowl parties worth of chicken every day. Can you imagine how silly you look carrying 10 rotisserie chickens in the street? But New Yorkers love to mind their own business. What really could have been his downfall, but actually didn't get reported until after he got arrested, was that Ming's urine was leaking into another tenant's apartment. I personally don't know what tiger piss smells like, but it definitely sounds like the name of a weed brand I would pay $80 for an eighth for, because the rappers I listen to make it sound cool. And then I'd get so high I'd get scared and become incapacitated for a couple hours. Then I would try putting on a movie, but it would actually make me more anxious. So I would just sit in my shower until my hands got pruny, and I would order like $60 worth of Uber Eats on my phone while still in the shower. And then I would try to dry off, but I was like so high that I wouldn't even fully dry off before I got the food. And then I would try eating the burger I ordered with like my wet hands, which wouldn't help with the bun integrity. And because I probably ordered like a super loaded burger with like, you know, spicy mayo and onions and bacon all over it, the bun integrity probably wasn't particularly good in the first place. So it would all start falling apart, and then I would see my face in the mirror like during the act of that. And I would have this like serious reconsideration about the way I'm living my life and start thinking about the fact that like my parents were getting married at my age and my grandparents were risking it all to come to this country for me to be ordering a Baconator from my phone in the shower. But yeah, so the tiger piss was leaking into someone else's apartment. But they didn't report it until after the fact. And we'll talk about reporting it and the implications of that a little bit later on. So what actually got Antoine in trouble? Well, himself, sort of. Antoine took in a stray cat named Shadow, because I guess he decided his little zoo wasn't complete. And inevitably, Ming the tiger snapped at the house cat. Antoine jumped in to defend Shadow and got hurt in the process. He laid there in agony with a huge wound. And when the police showed up and found him in the lobby, tried to claim it was a pit bull bite. Poor pit bulls, man, they can't ever catch a break. They even get blamed for other animals' bites. They weren't exactly buying it at the hospital, of course, as even though pit bulls are rather large and round, chunky little boys, when compared to other domesticated dogs, there's no way they could do what a tiger could do. After this, an anonymous caller told the police that there was a large animal living in Antoine's apartment. The cops showed up, and Antoine was nowhere to be found, even though he had already checked himself out of the hospital. Before they made it to apartment 5E, multiple residents confirmed that there was a tiger living in there, making it clear that it was a sort of open secret. The cops didn't want to kick the door down and be greeted with the pounce of an apex predator, but they also weren't sure if they were just being messed with at this point. So they cut a little hole in the door and they peered in. And sure enough, there was Ming. They couldn't believe their eyes. They had brought in a tiger specialist, Larry Wallach, from Long Island, who confirmed that it looked like the tiger was in great shape and was well fed. Rather than go through the front door, the NYPD opted for a more Mission Impossible approach, and Officer Martin Duffy rappelled down from the 7th floor with a tranquilizer gun and also a real M4 rifle that we're all happy he didn't actually have to use. To get his attention, he tapped on the window. Ming lunged at him and broke the glass. Duffy later admitted that he was pretty horrified. Duh. But he was able to fire off one tranquilizer dart, and the cops came in and took the sleepy tiger out on a gurney. They later found Antoine at a different hospital in Philadelphia, where he was arrested. So what was the actual law he was charged with? Yates was charged with reckless endangerment and possession of a wild animal. Owning a big cat in New York State actually wasn't illegal at the time, nor was it in 32 other states, but it was illegal in New York at the city level. On top of Antoine facing 7 years on his own charges, his mother also faced charges of endangering the welfare of a child because she had brought a kid over to babysit at some point. They figured out a plea agreement which had Antoine's jail time reduced to 6 months, and his mom's charges reduced to misdemeanors and no jail time. While this was pretty much his only course of action, Antoine was not satisfied with this outcome. He tried to sue the city to get his tiger back, but his case was dismissed. "I feel hurt, torn up," he said. "I have lost everything. My house, the only friend I had, Ming, and I lost my honor so that my mother could be free." While Antoine was made fun of and referred to as a crazy person by New York media, many others had a different view on things. While the lack of space for the tiger and other animals is definitely not defendable, his neighbors and friends came out in his defense, saying he took excellent care of the tiger. It was in good health, and some said it looked happier than the ones they had at the Bronx Zoo. And to hear Antoine tell it, his decision to live with the tiger was an indictment of the American situation. He told Mel magazine in 2020, this was an excellent article by the way, for anyone who wants to read a little more about it, that he felt like it was safer for him to lock himself inside his apartment in a project building in Harlem with a full-grown tiger than it was for him to continue walking around America as a black man. "I was sick and tired of it," he said. "So I literally locked myself in my house and I went and bought the tiger. Animals are only going to do what they are set out to do as designed by God. But with a human, you never know what to expect. Never, ever, ever, ever." Antoine made a point in interviews to say that he never felt threatened living with a tiger. When he told Ming to sit or chill, Ming sat or chilled. Ming was also declawed, apparently. The only reason he even got hurt protecting the stray cat was pure accident. He just jumped into the line of fire. If you ask me, the craziest part of this story is that someone can get away with living with 2 apex predators in New York for almost 3 years without any authorities catching on. It really speaks to the lack of care the city shows towards its people. Antoine himself pointed this out. There are supposed to be quarterly visits to check on the project apartment units. Now, if any of these visits actually happened, I promise they would have noticed the tiger and an alligator. They should have also noticed the tiger urine in the other unit. It makes sense that the media ran with the story of a crazy guy housing dangerous animals, which is understandable. But the real story here is that all these city people were not doing their jobs. If I lived in a luxury apartment building in Williamsburg and I tried to bring in a hippo, look how cute they are as babies, man, it's really crazy. I don't think that experiment would last very long. And the people who suffer from that are hardworking New Yorkers who qualify for public housing because their income doesn't reach a certain level. I have friends who grew up in NYC and they always talk about how long it takes for something to get fixed, if it even gets fixed at all. I work as a food delivery guy in New York and I've been in so many NYC buildings because of that, and over half of them in my experience don't have working locks on the front door, which is so dangerous. The conditions have deteriorated to the point where some of the stairwells are straight up gross. On top of that, there's even a case in Brooklyn of a serial killer who at the time of being suspected of 2 murders was able to move into a NYCHA building and commit a 3rd murder because no one is paying attention at the city government level. If there's a lesson to be learned here beyond the whole don't house dangerous creatures thing, it's that I think we should not allow the city to neglect huge parts of our community like this. This socio-political angle is very important to me, and I didn't see it reported in a lot of the original stuff from 2003 when this happened. But I also, of course, recognize that living in a small apartment building in Harlem is not good for a tiger, even if its owner loves and cares for it and feeds it properly. This story would be a lot more beautiful in a different setting, like a farm upstate or something. Antoine himself said he was working on building a Garden of Eden of sorts. According to multiple sources, he had been working on acquiring a piece of land somewhere upstate, so that he could properly house all these creatures. Now, step 1 should have been getting the land, and step 2 should have been getting the creatures. But small details and whatever. The law couldn't keep Antoine from chasing his dream after all. In 2008, New York Magazine reported he was receiving financial help from the likes of Michael Jackson and other celebrities who deemed themselves to be animal fans and took interest in the case. It also says that with their help, he purchased land in Las Vegas with the goal of becoming the first African American to own a private zoo in the United States. In 2012, it was reported he was living in Vegas with 22 big cats. However, checking in on Antoine now, it doesn't look like he's living in Vegas anymore. As of 2020, the most recent source I could find, Antoine is living in Philadelphia with no tigers, but a bunch of other animals, including snakes, tortoises, and chinchillas. Ming's next chapter of life was one of a mostly retired celebrity, with exceptions like being on an Arm & Hammer album cover. At the time of Antoine's arrest, he was moved to an animal sanctuary in Ohio called Noah's Lost Ark, where his owner tried their best to keep him out of the public eye. He lived there until 2020, when he passed away of natural causes at 19, which is said to be a pretty normal age for a tiger to live in captivity. The owner of the sanctuary said he had a good life, he had other tiger friends and a swimming pool, and was able to run and play on the grounds. His funeral in 2020 was modest. The owner said, "I wanted to keep him very private because Ming was private. He had this big spectacle when he was rescued and brought here. He deserves some peace." And what if I wanted to buy a tiger today? Well, a federal law was passed in 2022 to make owning a big cat illegal. And no, that doesn't mean like a fat house cat. That means like a tiger, a lion, a panther, a jaguar, a bunch of other big felines. However, if you already own one, you just have to register it and you can keep it. I don't know if anyone in my audience needed to hear that, but just in case. Hopefully you're keeping it in a space bigger than a New York City apartment. Is it a good idea to own a huge exotic animal in a small New York apartment? No. Is Antoine someone who seems to truly love and care for animals? To me, yeah. I came into this video expecting to tell a silly sounding story that really highlights how crazy New York is. But I left with a lot of empathy for both of its main characters. All I know is, when the HBO series for this drops, we can have a watch party. Peace.